Hello and welcome back to my gardening plot. How much progress have I made? Well, there's been a little bit of adjusting and accommodating, but I'll tell you more about that in a moment. Hello there, I'm Julie from Julie Davis Flower Workshops and Florist, the online flower arranging classes. Now, I am a totally novice gardener. I'm not a gardener at all, but we have cleared one part of our garden where we used to have a chicken shed and other little bits and pieces of outbuildings. And my husband is keen to neaten everything up and put it down to lawn. And I have said I'd quite like to investigate a cutting garden. So I teach flower arranging classes. It would be quite nice to be able to cut my own flowers to enjoy indoors, but also to take along to my classes. So the accommodation that we've come to is that the end of the garden, the side, will, I'm hoping temporarily, be put down to lawn. And if I can test my gardening skills successfully, I will be allowed to encroach into the newly lawned area. I think my husband has been quite sensible here. He knows I have no gardening skills or experience, and I'm rather thinking that he thinks that I think that he thinks that I'll get fed up with this little small bit here, and he will be able to have a beautifully manicured lawn to enjoy, because I'm never going to be able to extend beyond the remit of my tiny bit here, which is where we used to have our tortoise. So we'll have to wait and see. But I have made progress, because look, I've bought myself a book. And doesn't that mean that I'm going to be a good gardener? That's always the way, isn't it? As my sister says, all the tools and no idea. So I bought this book. It's Sarah Raven's Cutting Garden Journal, and I think I've mentioned Sarah Raven's book before. I had her, I think it was her first book that was published in 1994 called The Cutting Garden. I was looking online, it turned out I sort of passed the book on in the intervening years, I think only very recently during my great lockdown clear out of 2020. So I was looking at buying the book again, because I did remember enjoying it to read, even though I would never put anything into practice. So I think she has put out subsequent editions of the book, and I was a bit confused as to what book I should buy. They all had titles of variation on the same theme about being a cutting garden. And then when I did look online, on Amazon actually, there was a really good review of this book, and it basically said if you've never bought one of Sarah Raven's Cutting Garden books before, this would be the one to go for. But she said if you had the original books, this is just the same book updated and reworked. So I thought that was really, really handy advice. So the book is quite small and it's called a journal, and I thought in a moment, would you like to flick through some of the pages with me? Because if, like me, if you are a novice gardener or just thinking about designing, building a cutting garden, it might be the thing that you're looking for. And I'll make sure I leave a link to that in the description underneath the video. So in terms of my bit of the garden, this little bit here, I did say to my husband that I was going to use the no-dig method. I'm not actually sure whether I've told him this, but anyway, he thinks that I should be digging the garden over, and he thinks, again, this is going to be another barrier to me actually becoming a gardener, because he knows that I don't like digging. So I met a lady, I think I probably told you in the last video, at the Faversham Open Gardens. There was a market and there was a community garden who'd taken a stall, and they were selling plants, and they were also selling cut flowers. And the lady who had the stall was telling me that they are a no-dig garden, and that they had a flower grower there with a no-dig. So I thought that's right up my street, but I don't actually know what no-dig means. And when I googled it, it said that for a no-dig garden, you have to cover your garden in cardboard and then mulch over the top. And I'm presuming that's to suppress the weeds. And in actual fact, when we moved in to this house 25 plus years ago, that's exactly what we did. We took up some carpets from the house, some very old Axminster carpets, which were red and yellow swirly patterns, and we laid them out on this, like, 'cause I think originally this might have been a vegetable patch and it got very weedy, and my husband has said that when he's been clearing out the patch that he's been trying to flatten it and just turn the soil over, he's been finding lots of tendrils from that carpet. So is it a weed suppressant way of gardening, or it's just that you don't dig because you don't want to destroy the soil structure? So my version of a no-dig garden is that, first of all, I know I have to clear the rubbishy bits out of the garden, but my idea is I'm just going to spot dig holes to plant my plants in. So my husband has said he's been growing, I'm sitting around with a little sort of nursery at my feet, and my husband's been growing zinnias from seed in little window boxes, little plastic troughs, and they are due to be planted out shortly. So that's probably going to be one of the first things I plant, seeds that he has pre-grown for me, and I'm just going to spot plant them. But before I do that, I've got a bit of tidying up to do. We've had a bay tree cut down just to its stumps, so I've got a bit of the loose foliage from that I've got to pick up, and there's still a little bit of you know how it's sort of garden detritus. There seems to be some random metal poles in the ground. I've come across in the undergrowth in an old hanging basket. How on earth did that get there? So I just need to do a little bit of tidying to prove that I'm earning my gardener's stripes. So come with me as I do a little bit of tidying up, and then towards the end of the video, why don't we flick through the book together and see whether I can start to picture the kind of garden I want. So now my garden has shrunk from that 10 metres by about 3 metres, tapering to 2 at the end. I've probably got an area now that's about 2 metres by 2 metres, but it's a start, and if I can prove that I can do it, fingers crossed I'll get the consent of the head gardener to move on up to the end of the garden. So gardening gloves on. I've had my nails done and I don't want to spoil them. I guess gardening and having nice hands doesn't really go together. And of course I'm a bit bereft in terms of gardening tools, so I'm going to use my floristry scissors if I need them as a little scoop. I'm being lazy because we do have a garden shed, but it's right at the other end of the garden. It's got a combination lock and I can't remember what the combination is. So those are bits of the bay tree. And I'm discovering here that we have a rose, which looks like it's climbing up. This is, what is this? It's a lilac tree, and it's become smothered with the ivy. And it looks like we always think it's in the last death throes of doing its thing, but it does seem to be surviving. Can you see there? It's been totally trimmed. And in fact, it's got an old bird's nest up here. Let's see if we can have a look at it. Look. Isn't that lovely? Really, really solid. I don't suppose anybody's going to come back and nest in it, but something I need to get some advice about from my husband is whether we can take back some more of the ivy. So the stump here is the lilac tree, and it's always been at a jaunty angle ever since we moved in, but over the years it's just become more and more encased in the ivy, which we quite liked because it's good for the wildlife. The ivy flowers and then the berries were useful for my flower arranging, but it's really, really smothered the tree. So we want some sort of privacy from next door, but I just wonder whether we could look at taking some more of this back without actually destroying the tree underneath. I think actually that might be, there's a huge stem there, possibly that might be sort of an ivy tree that's growing up separately. So I do think that probably this needs a little bit more investigation so I can clear out a bit more ground space and that it's not going to cast too much of a shadow. So I'm filming this 8 o'clock in the morning, so I wanted to have a look and see where the sun was going to be. So it does get the intensity of the evening sunshine, although we can't actually see the sunset from the garden. So if that's west, that's east. And I would say that because of the trees, it is still in shade. So I don't think this garden's going to get much of the morning or midday sunshine. It's going to be an evening sunshine garden. So I'm going to start picking up random bits of fence panel, and there's a little bit here of, I have to step down to the patio. So getting rid of the big stuff. All the sort of leafage. I seem to have lots of plastic as well. I guess I should just get rid of that. Actually, I shouldn't put the plastic in there because I'm going to put that in the compost bin. I need two piles, things that I can compost and things that plastic need to go into the bin. But here's one of the metal spikes. It must have been part of the enclosure for the tortoises. Oh, it's too difficult for me to pull out. I have to resort to plan B. So this is what I found. I got the hanging basket out. There's a few bits of old fence paddle, some larger bricks and things like that, and then just a few larger stumps I'm just going to put straight into our composting bin. So let's flick through Sarah Raven's Cutting Garden Journal. So it's divided out into months, and each month is sort of colour coded, but I don't want to read the whole book just now. I'm bookmarked the July pages, so much like the other book I showed you last time, if I can work out what I could be harvesting in July, I'll know what I need to pick, and it'll just give me some ideas of the kind of things I could be picking. So there's advice on making flower arrangements. I don't need that advice, but there's somewhere to make some notes, mixed arrangements. So this is what I'm interested in. Amy Majors is already on my list. Last summer, I don't know whether you saw the series where I had a subscription from a local flower farmer, and that was something that I admired. There's dill. Now we do have fennel growing in our garden, so it's the same sort of shape. Dianthus or the pinks, I'm not entirely sure that I want to grow those, although we do have Sweet Williams at the moment. Antirrhinums, they would be on my list. Eremurus, the foxtail lily, might be quite nice to have. And then perhaps to go into August a little bit as well, just to see what is coming up in the next few months. So taking semi-ripe cuttings. At the moment, I'm not at that stage in my gardening journey. I think I just want to be able to buy the plants that are already, being grown on and plant them up and just have a bit of instant gratification. Cosmos, I love cosmos, and my fantasy would be for my garden of abundance, just, armfuls and armfuls of cosmos. We do have some acanthus growing in the garden. That was a request I put in last year with my husband. So we've got some of those. And the sunflowers, I don't have a big enough space for sunflowers. Zinnias, now that is one of the things that my husband's been growing, so I will be able to plant some of those. And agapanthus, I love those, but they just don't seem to like our garden. So lots and lots to think about. So I need to put my thinking cap on. So I've achieved a little bit today, and that's going to be my watchword. I don't want, a bit like housework, I don't want it to become a chore when I have to do loads of jobs in one big hit, and it's going to be very overwhelming and daunting. But if I get into a routine where perhaps I have my morning cup of tea, I tend to do the washing up that doesn't go into the dishwasher, and then if I was to come out to the garden and do some housework in the garden as well, I've just spent literally 10 minutes clearing up this little patch, but it's a job done, it's a tick, it's a step in the right direction. So as ever, if you've got any gardening tips for me, perhaps you've been a novice gardener, things you can share with me, or perhaps you're a more experienced gardener and you could explain a bit more about this no-dig method, and is it possible to have an easy gardening experience, or am I going to have lots of skills which I'm going to find a little bit off-putting? So thank you so much for joining me. I'd love it if you would leave me a comment, a little bit of a word of encouragement, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and I'll let you know next Tuesday how I've been getting on.